You know what really grinds my gears? Is people who swear they love the US Constitution so much, hug it, kiss it, take it out for a nice seafood dinner, and turn around and treat that poor Constitution like a piece of garbage when it's not convenient. Yes, I'm looking at you, Donald Trump, and the MAGA crowd. These folks wrap themselves in the flag, sometimes literally, and proclaim Constitution this, Constitution that, right up until the moment our nation's actual constitutional principles get in the way of their personal power. That's when suddenly Constitution never met him. Trump performing his patented move, hugging the American flag at CPAC as if it were a long lost love. He says he loves Old Glory, but if only that affection extended to what the flag stands for, like the Constitution and the rule of law. It's the ultimate photo op patriotism. Embrace the flag on stage, undermine the country's founding principles backstage. Let's start Exhibit A. Donald J. Trump himself. Self-declared most constitutional president ever. Just ask him, he'll tell you. The same guy who literally called for the termination of the Constitution when he didn't like an election result. No, I'm not making this up. In December 2022, after losing the election, Trump ranted on Truth Social that a massive fraud allows for the termination of all rules, regulations, and articles, even those founded in the Constitution. That's right. Mr. I Love America basically proposed tossing the Constitution into a shredder because the voters rejected him. He actually suggested suspending the very document he swore an oath to protect. You can almost hear the founding fathers groaning in unison. Hypocrisy level 1776 out of 10. And how about a peaceful transfer of power? You know, that little bedrock of constitutional tradition since George Washington? Trump treated it like a joke. Before the 2020 election, he refused to commit to a peaceful transfer if he lost, musing, well, we'll have to see what happens. When asked if he'd honor the results, we'll have to see. That's something to say about a cliffhanger ending of a TV show, not the survival of American democracy. Of course, we did see what happened. He lost the vote and promptly tried everything to overturn the outcome, eventually inciting a mob to attack the Capitol and stop the certification of the election. Peaceful transfer? Nah, Trump preferred an attempted insurrection because nothing says I cherish the Constitution like sending an angry crowd to beat up police officers with flagpoles and hunt down your own vice president in order to cling to power. The only orderly transition Trump cared for was an orderly transition Oval Office back to his own hands by any means necessary. The wildest part, they still claim to be patriots. After the January 6th fiasco, plenty of MAGA figures defended the rioters or pretended that it was no big deal, even calling them political prisoners. Trump himself promised to pardon most of those convicted for the Capitol attack, saying on day one he'd set them free. What'd he do? He actually claimed the January 6 convicts were treated unfairly by a very nasty justice system and even excused those who assaulted police officers, saying they had no choice. Pardon me, these are the same law and order Republicans who spent years shouting Blue Lives Matter, yet when their supporters brutalized Capitol Police, suddenly attackers are the victims who had no choice? I guess backing the blue applies until the moment the blue backs up the Constitution instead of dear leader. In Trump's world, peaceful protesters taking a knee in the NFL are sons of bitches who should be fired. But violent rioters beating cops with Trump flags are patriots who should be pardoned. Wrap your head around that one. King Trump, above the law in his mind. Now, Trump and his cronies love to talk about law and order, but apparently law and order only for other people. Because when the law comes knocking on Trump's own door, he basically said, sorry, I'm above it. He's been arguing that as a former president, he's immune from any accountability whatsoever. An utterly absurd claim of absolute presidential immunity that flies in the face of the fundamental American idea that no one is above the law. Trump's lawyers actually went to the court and said that he had blanket immunity for anything he did while he was president, even if that was to subvert the election. Yes, according to Trump, you can do anything as president, possibly shoot someone on Fifth Avenue as he braggadociously speculated. You can't be prosecuted because Article 2 gives you magic powers. Who knew? Thankfully, even our somewhat coward judicial system couldn't fully swallow that. The Supreme Court's conservative majority did grant Trump a disturbing amount of leeway, ruling that former presidents have absolute immunity for core acts and presumptive immunity for anything plausibly within their duties. But even they had to gently point out that Trump's claim of total immunity was way overboard. In Chief Justice Roberts' polite terms, Trump asserts a far broader immunity than limited one we have recognized. No kidding. Trump essentially wanted a get-out-of-jail-free card for all actions. As Justice Sotomayor blasted in dissent, the court's ruling already makes a mockery of the principle that no man is above the law, and that was with the limited immunity. Imagine the mockery if Trump had his way entirely. He basically longs to be an American king, immune from consequences. You know, the exact thing our Constitution was written to prevent. Remember, this is the same guy who once said, I have in Article 2 where I have the right to do whatever I want as president. According to King Donald's interpretation, the Constitution's grant of executive power is a blank check for authoritarian mischief. And he's doubling down on that for the second term. Trump and his allies have been reportedly cooking up plans to expand presidential powers to unheard of extremes. And now that he's back in office, there's even a manifesto for it, something called Project 2025, a 900-page right-wing wish list from Trump's think tank. Buddies that spell out how to dismantle checks and balances and turn the presidency into an autocratic weapon. How do we know it's bad? Well, Heritage Foundation, the group behind it, literally lists one of its main aims as dismantle the administrative state. They want to gut the civil service, purge anyone not loyal, and let the president rule the bureaucracy like his personal fiefdom. Trump even said he'll reclassify tens of thousands of federal workers so he can fire them en masse and replace them with loyalists. 50,000 longtime public servants turned into Trump's minions at the snap of a finger. So much for merit-based, nonpartisan governance. The plan is basically to erase independent institutions and ensure that every lever of government, justice, intelligence, regulatory agencies, all answer to Trump alone. Because why have a constitutional system of separated powers when you can have dear leader directives? And get this, even Trump himself occasionally acts like Project 2025 is too blunt for public consumption. I wonder why. He claimed, I know nothing about Project 2025. He distanced himself from its ridiculous and abysmal ideas. Meanwhile, he's hiring its authors and following it to the letter once in power. It's the old MAGA two-step. Publicly deny the autocratic plan, privately implement the autocratic plan. Honestly, at this point, they should just replace the GOP elephant with a chameleon, Constitution-loving patriots in campaign speeches, constitutional shredding despots behind closed doors. Let's talk about the First Amendment, another pesky part of the Constitution that Trump rolled adores in theory and tramples in practice. These folks love to holler about free speech when they're the ones getting banned from Twitter and inciting violence, and when they want to chant vulgaries at school board meetings. But what's Trump's idea of free speech? Apparently it's free speech for Trump and his fans and zero speech for anyone who criticizes him. This man has a Nixonian enemies list that would make old Tricky Dicky blush. He's literally bragged on the campaign trail that if he's reelected, he will punish and silence media outlets that aren't sufficiently adoring. Trump has pledged to toss critical reporters in jail and strip networks of their broadcast licenses as retribution for coverage he doesn't like. Yes, jail journalists for doing their job, straight out of a dictator playbook. He's mused about sissing the FCC on news networks, even though yanking licenses over news content would be blatantly illegal and unconstitutional. Minor detail. As the chairwoman of the FCC dryly noted, we do not take licenses away because a candidate dislikes the coverage. You would think that would be obvious in America, but not to Trump, who hears First Amendment and apparently think that means the right to praise Trump or else. We've also learned that in private, during his first term, Trump repeatedly discussed using the Department of Justice to go after journalists. Reports revealed that he asked advisors if he could jail reporters to stop leaks, and his administration aggressively pursued leak investigations for reporters' communications. This is the same guy who routinely calls the press enemies of the people, a phrase so despotic, even his own advisors begged him to stop using it. He didn't. All of this, of course, is completely contrary to the Constitution's protection of free press. A president who truly values the First Amendment doesn't shut down news outlets for unfavorable stories. But Trump has made over 100 separate threats to investigate or punish his perceived critics and opponents. Many of them journalists, political rivals, even private citizens who crossed him. 100. At this point, he's basically promising a presidency of revenge vendettas, a purge of anyone who ever spoke against him. Meanwhile, his allies have the gall to claim President Trump was a champion for free speech. Sure, and I'm the Queen of England. Tellingly, press freedom groups are horrified. They say Trump is intentionally whipping up hatred of independent media who could deal a death blow to the First Amendment if given the chance. So when MAGA crowds wave the Constitution around but cheer Trump on as he vows to muzzle free press, it's clear their love of the First Amendment is only skin deep. They want the freedom to spread their propaganda. But if you're a journalist asking tough questions, lock them up, says Trump. Free speech for ordinary Americans? MAGA selectively approves that too. Peacefully protesting racial injustice by taking a knee equals get that son of a bitch off the field. He's fired. Trump barked about NFL players to roaring approval from his fan base. But violently storming the Capitol to overturn the election? These people are patriots who deserve pardons. The hypocrisy is Olympic level. They'll scream about cancel culture if a bigot is banned from YouTube. But they're perfectly fine with the government canceling entire media outlets or firing athletes for silent protests. In other words, dissent is only allowed if MAGA approved. Anyone else, whether it's CNN or Colin Kaepernick, should apparently shut up or face state retaliation. How very constitutional of them. Law and order, only when convenient. Perhaps the thickest layer of hypocrisy in this constitutional farce comes with law enforcement and rule of law. Remember when Republicans presented themselves as the party of law and order? Back the blue, respect law enforcement, no matter what? That went out the window fast. Once the FBI and Department of Justice had the audacity to investigate Trump's misdeeds, now suddenly we're hearing MAGA chants of defund the FBI. Sound familiar? The same crowd that foamed at the mouth when Black Lives Matter protesters called to defund local police have now adopted the slogan for themselves, targeting federal law enforcement because it's investigating their dear leader. You want irony? Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, a charter member of the MAGA caucus, tweeted in 2021 that exploding crime was the result of left-wing policies of defunding the police. She lambasted Democrats for not respecting cops. But mere months later, when the FBI searched Trump's Mar-a-Lago for stolen classified documents, guess what she tweeted? Defund the FBI. In all caps. No joke. She went from defunding the police equals crime and chaos to let's abolish the premier law enforcement agency of the U.S. because it dared to execute a lawful warrant on King Donald's palace. The cognitive dissonance is breathtaking. It's like watching someone argue that fire is bad, unless it's their arson. In which case, fire is great. We should abolish the fire department for trying to put it out. It's not just Green. Other Republicans made the same dizzying turn. GOP Congressman Jeff Duncan rallied in 2020 that calls to defund the police would cause far more chaos. Then, in 2022, furiously asked, at what point do we abolish the FBI and start over? The MAGA message is clear. Law enforcement is sacred until it comes after us. Then, by all means, torch it. After one of his many indictments, Trump himself called on Congress to defund the Justice Department and the FBI. Yes, the ex-president, now president, urged his party to kneecap the nation's top law enforcement agencies. Republicans in Congress should defund the Department of Justice and the FBI until they come to their senses. Trump blared on social media because, in his mind, the only sensible justice system is one that never holds him accountable. It's a sharp turn indeed. Even Reuters dryly noted how bizarre it was for Republicans, the law and order party, to suddenly echo a defund slogan they once demonized. The hypocrisy is so blatant, it's almost performance art. One minute, they're tearing up the nation's anthem and praising police. The next minute, they're vilifying the FBI agents as the Gestapo and threatening to slash their budget because the rule of law dared to inconvenience their guy. Of course, when it comes to actually enforcing laws that protect democracy, MAGA world also has selective vision. They had no problem with the Justice Department, when it was investigating Hillary Clinton's emails or when Trump's attorney general was tear gassing protesters in Lafayette Square. But the moment the Department of Justice starts probing Trump's coup attempt or his hoarding of classified documents, suddenly the attorney general is a traitor, the FBI is corrupt, and the prosecutors are thugs and scum. Trump routinely smears judges and prosecutors overseeing his trials. He's called special counsel Jack Smith deranged and a lunatic and attacked judges as Obama appointees or worse. His allies in Congress haul in FBI and Department of Justice officials for grillings, not to support law enforcement, but to intimidate and discredit any investigation of Trump. They even launched a House committee to probe the weaponization of government, which is rich, because Trump is openly promising to weaponize the government against his enemies, as we saw with his threats and promises of payback. It's pure projection. Accuse others of what you're doing and tear down any institution that challenges you. If democratic processes don't favor MAGA, they'll try to change the rules too. Constitutional norms be damned. Did you notice how after 2020 election there was talk in some MAGA circles about invoking martial law or using state legislatures to override the popular vote? They literally explored extra-constitutional maneuvers to overturn a democratic election. Fast forward to now, and some of the right have floated wacky ideas like raising the voting age, since young voters lean liberal. One prominent MAGA-friendly figure, Vivek Ramaswamy, proposed a constitutional amendment to bar most Americans under 25 from voting unless they pass a civics test or do military service. Because in recent elections, youth turnout helped Democrats. So hey, let's change the Constitution to disenfranchise the youth. If you can't win the game, rig the rules. It's the same mentality as Trump claiming fraud and wanting to get rid of the ballots when he feared losing. They loudly tout the First Amendment or Second Amendment when it's their speech or guns on the line. But if democracy or any other constitutional principle delivers an outcome they dislike, suddenly they're quite open to shredding those parts of the Constitution. As one aghast White House spokesman put it after Trump's terminate the Constitution rant, you can not only love America when you win. But apparently, Trump and his followers missed that memo. To them, rules and rights are conditional, valid only when they cement MAGA power. At this point, the hypocrisy is so thick you could pour it on pancakes. Trump and the MAGA movement clutch to the Constitution in public like it's their favorite prop. But behind closed doors, and sometimes right out in the open, they are plotting to undermine every value it stands for. Checks and balances, only until Trump wants to override them. Free speech, only for the MAGA megaphone. Independent judiciary, only if it rules in their favor. Otherwise, the judges are deep state and can be ignored or attacked. Peaceful transfer of power, only if their candidate wins. Otherwise, unleash the mob. It's a perverse form of patriotism that's 100% contingent on them being in charge. The second they're not, out come the calls to suspend the Constitution, scrap democratic processes, and sick the power of the state on their opponents. They basically turn the Constitution into a paper shield, something to thump their chest about while actively hollowing it out. Let's not mince words. This is dangerous. It's also darkly comical in its two-facedness, which is why I can't help but rant. Trump and his followers are like arsonists running around screaming that they love the fire code. You can't have it both ways. You can't claim to revere America's founding charter, cheering a man who literally said we should terminate that charter's articles. That's not patriotism. That's what I'd call a Benedict Arnold in a red MAGA hat. So next time you hear these folks crow about the Constitution, remember all this. Remember that Trump's idea of constitutional love is a one-night stand. He'll cozy up to the Constitution when it suits his ego, and trash it the second it restrains him. He's not its guardian. He's its repeat abuser. In the MAGA movement, they're enablers in the background, hypocritically egging him on. They cry freedom while chanting for their enemies to be jailed. They applaud law and order until law and order demand holding their leader accountable. They praise the founders' wisdom out of one side of their mouth, while out of the other, they call the founders' Constitution archaic and flawed whenever it blocks their agenda. In a way, it's fitting that Trump once hugged the American flag on stage, because that image perfectly encapsulates this crowd's ethos. They embrace the symbols of America, the flag, the Constitution, but only in the most superficial way. Squeeze it tight, wave it around for the cameras, but pay no respect to what it actually stands for. It's all for show. The moment that flag or Constitution demands something of them, like accepting an election loss or adhering to the rule of law, they drop it like a hot potato or try to set it on fire. Well, I don't buy it, and neither should you. Loving the Constitution means upholding it even when it's hard or when you lose. That's literally the point. It's bigger than any one man or movement. Trump and MAGA have shown by their actions that their supposed love of the Constitution is about as real as a degree from Trump University. It's a sham, a joke, one that stopped being funny on January 6, 2021, if it ever was. The hypocrisy is blatant. The contempt for our founding principles is palpable, and the danger to our democracy is real. If this is how the MAGA movement loves the Constitution, by undermining it at every turn, then heaven help us if they ever decide to hate it. They claim to carry the Constitution in their pockets. I'd suggest they actually read the darn thing, because right now, their behavior shows they regard it as a doormat or a step over or sweep aside on the way to power. And for all their bluster about America first, nothing could be more un-American than trying to destroy the Constitution while pretending to defend it. In the end, the joke's on them. The Constitution has survived 234 years of far better men and worse ones than Donald Trump. World wars, and yes, even reality TV demagogues. But it only works if we see through their con. And the con in constitutional conservative has never been more obvious. Kevin out.